Imagine an incredibly advanced computer screaming something like, terrain ahead, pull up, 21 separate times.
21 times.
Right. It's this synthetic voice blaring in a confined space, practically begging the humans in the room to just take action.
It's terrifying to even picture.
It really is. And now imagine a highly trained airline pilot who is responsible for the lives of over 150 people, ignoring every single one of those desperate warnings.
Just tuning them out entirely.
Exactly. Tuning them out and continuing to fly a perfectly healthy aircraft directly into a mountain. I mean, it sounds impossible.
That sounds like fiction, honestly.
Yeah, it sounds like a movie script, but it is exactly what happened on July 28th, 2010.
It is.
So today, we are taking a deep dive into the catastrophic loss of Airblue Flight 202, which was an Airbus A321 that went down in the Margalla Hills of Pakistan.
And, our mission today isn't just to look at the mechanical timeline. We're doing something a bit different.
Right. We are digging into the official accident investigation data. This is from the POCSIA, hosted via the Aviation Safety Network, so we can really understand the human factors at play here.
Because that's the real story.
It is. We are looking at how a toxic cockpit culture, a bruised ego, and just a complete breakdown in communication entirely overrode millions of dollars of perfect safety technology.
Yeah, technology that worked exactly as it was supposed to.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how a crew ignores 21 separate alarms, we first have to understand the environment they were flying into.
Exactly. So, to set the scene, this was a scheduled domestic service in Pakistan. They were flying from Karachi in the south up to the capital, Islamabad.
Right.
And the very first critical element of this entire sequence is the physical environment at their destination. Because the weather in Islamabad that morning was, well, to put it mildly, deeply hostile to aviation.
Yeah, deeply hostile is a good way to put it. I was actually looking at the meteorological data from that morning, the METAR reports that the pilots themselves would have been reviewing, and it paints a genuinely grim picture.
It really does.
We're talking about rapidly deteriorating visibility, dropping down to just 2,000 meters in heavy rain. Plus, you had these low, thick, scattered clouds sitting at just 1,000 feet off the ground, and perhaps worst of all, towering cumulonimbus clouds.
Yeah, the CB clouds.
Right. And for anyone listening who isn't a massive aviation weather nerd, cumulonimbus clouds aren't just rainmakers. They are massive, violently unstable columns of energy.
Full of severe updrafts, downdrafts, and turbulence.
Exactly. They are the exact type of weather system that commercial airliners are strictly designed to avoid.
The conditions were so punishing that other highly trained crews who were operating the exact same airspace were already throwing in the towel.
Wait, really? Other flights were giving up?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just a theoretical danger. A previous Pakistan International Airlines flight, arriving right around the same time, had to make 3 separate attempts just to get the aircraft on the ground safely.
Wow. 3 attempts.
And another flight, an airliner arriving from China, simply evaluated the conditions, decided the risk profile was entirely unacceptable, gave up, and returned to its origin.
Which is exactly what the system is designed to allow. I mean, the aviation system is built around the idea of a safety valve.
Right. If the weather is beyond your limits, you divert.
But Flight 202 didn't divert. They are cleared for what is called a runway 12 circling approach. Now, based on the data, a circling approach is already considered a very high workload maneuver for a crew, especially in bad weather, right?
Oh, absolutely. You essentially have to keep the physical runway in sight out your window while maneuvering the aircraft at a very low altitude.
Right. And to keep pilots from simply descending through the clouds and just, hoping for the best, every approach has strict mathematical rules.
Including a minimum descent altitude, or MDA.
Yes, the MDA. For this specific approach into Islamabad, the hard deck was exactly 2,510 feet. And the rule is binary, right? You do not go a single foot below that altitude, unless you have the runway environment clearly in sight.
And that MDA is a hard, non-negotiable floor. It is not an arbitrary suggestion. It's calculated by engineers, specifically to keep the aircraft safely above the highest known terrain and obstacles in that specific sector.
But this is where things start to go wrong.
Yeah, this is exactly where the chain of human error begins to form. The POCSIA investigation found that the captain deliberately descended below that minimum descent altitude.
Deliberately?
Yes. He dropped the aircraft down to 2,300 feet.
So he shaves off 210 feet of his safety margin. And, I mean, it might not sound like a lot to a layperson, but in aviation, that is a massive violation.
It's huge.
And predictably, by dropping lower into that terrible weather and rain, he loses visual contact with the airfield.
And at this exact moment, the standard operating procedure is crystal clear.
You abort.
Exactly. You execute a missed approach, push the throttles forward, climb back up to a safe altitude, and you either try again or you divert to another city.
But he doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't. And this is where the sequence shifts from, a standard procedural violation into something much, much more dangerous.
Right.
Instead of aborting the approach when he lost sight of the runway, the captain decides to essentially improvise. He attempts to fly a non-standard self-created approach.
A self-created approach.
Yeah. In technical terms, it's referred to as a PBD, or place-bearing distance RNAV approach.
Okay, let's strip away the technical jargon for a second, because calling it a PBD RNAV approach makes it sound very official and sanctioned.
It does sound professionally.
But when you actually look at what he was doing, it's staggering. It's like, okay, imagine you're driving in a total whiteout blizzard. The visibility is 0.
Right.
And instead of pulling over, or at least keeping your tires strictly between the painted lines and the guardrails of the highway, you decide to just off-road blindly through a mountain pass.
Wow.
And you're navigating via a hand-drawn map you sketched out on a napkin 5 minutes ago. I mean, he was dropping his own digital breadcrumbs into the flight computer instead of flying the mathematically proven invisible highway in the sky.
That is a remarkably accurate way to visualize the danger here. By creating his own custom waypoints in the flight management system, rather than following the published vetted routes, he completely detached the aircraft from the established safety net.
It's terrifying.
What's fascinating here is the psychological phrasing the official accident report uses to describe this moment.
Oh, what did they say?
The investigators state that the crew failed to display superior judgment in and this is a direct quote, self-created unsafe environment.
Self-created. I think that is the most chilling phrase in the entire report.
Yeah.
Because the Airbus was fine, the engines were turning, the instruments were functioning perfectly. The danger didn't exist until the captain typed it into the computer.
Exactly. The report highlights the crew's pursuit to land in inclement weather. Now, this is a very well-documented psychological trap in human factors research.
Right, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's often called get-there-itis, or more formally, planned continuation bias. As humans, when we invest significant time and cognitive effort into a plan, like flying from Karachi to Islamabad, our brains desperately want to complete that plan.
We just want to finish the task.
Right. As the captain got closer to the destination, his desire to land became so singularly focused that his risk assessment completely degraded.
He couldn't see the big picture anymore.
Exactly. He began to view standard safety protocols not as lifelines that keep you alive, but as annoying obstacles standing between him and the runway.
Wow.
And by flying this improvised, self-created route, the aircraft ended up transgressing 4.3 nautical miles entirely outside of the protected safe airspace.
4.3 nautical miles. We're talking about roughly 5 miles of deviation when you are flying at a low altitude in a mountainous region.
It's a huge error.
That is a massive spatial error. And because of this improvised routing, he is now pointing the aircraft directly toward the Margalla Hills.
Right.
The visibility is virtually 0. He's hundreds of feet lower than he should be, and he's completely off the map. But this brings us to the technological failsafe.
Yes.
Because even though the human beings in the cockpit were essentially flying blind, the airplane itself was fully aware of the danger.
It was. Modern commercial airliners, including the Airbus A321, are equipped with an incredibly sophisticated piece of technology called an EGPWS.
Yeah.
That's an enhanced ground proximity warning system.
And this isn't just an old school radar, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This is a massive leap forward from older aviation technology. In the past, planes had simple radar altimeters, which just bounced a radio wave straight down to tell you how far you were from the ground directly beneath you.
Which doesn't help if you are flying horizontally into a sheer cliff face.
Exactly. But the EGPWS is different. It is a high-resolution, three-dimensional digital terrain database of the entire world, built right into its memory banks.
That's incredible.
It constantly compares the aircraft's GPS position, its altitude, its heading, and its speed, and looks forward in time and space.
So it knows what's coming.
Yes. If it calculates that there is a mountain in the projected flight path, it doesn't just quietly flash a tiny amber light on the dashboard. It actively, aggressively tries to break the pilot's concentration to save their lives.
And reading the transcript from the cockpit voice recorder, it absolutely tried. As they were flying directly toward the rising rocky terrain of the Margalla Hills, the EGPWS triggered.
And it wasn't a subtle warning.
Not at all. It wasn't just a single warning chime. The voice recorder captured 21 distinct EGPWS warnings. 21.
It's hard to fathom.
It is literally a blaring synthetic voice shouting, "Terrain ahead! Pull up!" over and over again in the cockpit. And this is where I have to pause and try to wrap my head around the human element here.
Yeah.
Because I can't even ignore my own car when it beeps at me to put my seatbelt on. It drives me completely insane within about 3 seconds.
Right. It's designed to be annoying.
So I have to ask, how does a highly trained professional pilot who knows exactly what that alarm means tune out 21 life-saving blaring alarms from the plane's own computer?
Well, it is entirely baffling to the layperson.
Yeah.
It seems like it must be a conscious choice to ignore it, right?
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
But it actually speaks to a very dangerous, well-documented quirk of human neurology known as target fixation, combined with something called auditory exclusion.
Auditory exclusion.
Yeah. When a human being is under extreme cognitive load, for example, trying to mentally manage an improvised landing approach in a violent storm while flying a massive jetliner, the brain simply runs out of processing power.
Okay, so it just maxes out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To cope with the overwhelming visual information, the brain starts shedding secondary inputs. It literally stops processing audio signals from the ear to the conscious auditory cortex.
Wait, really? So you're saying it's not that he heard the alarms and just decided to ignore them, but that his brain might have physically muted the sound because he was too stressed?
In many cases of extreme cognitive overload, yes. The conscious mind of a pilot who is absolutely convinced they're in control and who believes they are just seconds away from breaking through the clouds to see the runway operates on a flawed mental model.
So his internal map was just wrong.
Completely wrong. The captain's mental map of where he was in the world did not match physical reality. He had suffered a complete loss of situational awareness.
Wow.
Because his brain knew he was on a safe approach to the runway, any contradictory information, even a blaring alarm, was filtered out as a nuisance or simply not consciously registered.
That's terrifying.
The investigation bluntly noted this as serious violations of procedures and breaches of flying discipline. He lacked the superior judgment required to step back, break the cognitive tunnel vision, and reassess.
He just kept going.
He pushed the aircraft onward, resulting in what the industry calls a CFIT-controlled flight into terrain.
Well, the plane was perfectly fine.
Perfectly healthy. Its engines were producing thrust, its flight controls were responding perfectly, but it was flown perfectly under control directly into the side of a mountain.
Okay, the neurology of cognitive overload makes sense when we're talking about a single human brain. I mean, I think everyone has experienced a mild version of that tunnel vision where you're so focused on reading an email that you don't hear someone standing right next to you calling your name.
Sure, we've all been there.
But an Airbus A321 doesn't have just one human brain in the cockpit. There is a first officer sitting right next to the captain.
Right.
That is the entire fundamental principle of modern commercial aviation. It's the ultimate redundancy. If the captain gets tunnel vision, if the captain succumbs to plan continuation bias, the first officer is sitting right there.
That's their job.
Exactly. Their job is to look at the instruments, realize the spatial error, hear those 21 blaring alarms and say, "Captain, pull up," or even physically take the controls. So where was the first officer in all of this?
This brings us to the core focus of the human factors investigation, and honestly, it's the most tragic finding of the entire disaster.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right that the first officer is the final, ultimate safety net. But the Pakistani investigation found that during this entire fatal descent into the Margalla Hills, the first officer remained a completely passive bystander.
He didn't do anything.
He did not participate as an effective team member. He did not supplement the captain's actions with helpful data. And crucially, he failed to assertively correct the captain's fatal deviations from the standard operating procedures.
But when you read the transcripts, he isn't incapacitated. He isn't unconscious. He's awake. He's a trained pilot.
Yes.
Why would a trained professional sit in silence and let someone fly him into a mountain?
The official report uncovered exactly why. And the root cause of that silence didn't happen in those final, desperate minutes in the storm clouds over Islamabad.
It happened earlier.
Much earlier. The true pathology of this crash was established an hour earlier, on the ground and during the initial climb out of Karachi.
Right. And this is where the story shifts from a technical failure to a horrifying study of workplace psychology.
It really is.
Because the cockpit voice recorder captures exactly what happened during that climb out of Karachi. The captain didn't just fly the plane. He decided to aggressively test the first officer's technical knowledge.
Now, to be clear, some informal mentoring or quizzing does happen in cockpits. It can be a healthy way to keep skills sharp.
Sure, like a quick quiz.
But the investigation found that this was radically different. The report specifically notes that the captain used harsh words and a snobbish tone. It was entirely contrary to the airline's established procedures and norms for professional conduct. It wasn't mentoring, it was an interrogation.
He was systematically belittling him. And what really struck me reading the sources is the duration.
Yeah, it went on and on.
This wasn't just a brief, snappy exchange where the captain lost his temper for a minute. The voice recorder revealed that this questioning, this harsh lecturing, and this intermittent humiliation continued for about an hour after takeoff.
An entire hour.
The captain spent the first half of the entire flight systematically tearing down his first officer's confidence and establishing a rigid dictatorial hierarchy.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of aviation safety, you're looking at a catastrophic failure of crew resource management, or CRM.
Right, CRM.
Back in the 1970s and 80s, the industry realized that planes were crashing purely because of steep hierarchical gradients. The captain was treated like an unquestionable god of the sky, and the first officer was conditioned to be just a silent apprentice who spoke only when spoken to.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Extremely. So CRM was a psychological revolution in aviation, designed specifically to flatten that hierarchy. It trains first officers to speak up, to challenge the captain, and to take over if safety is compromised.
But what we see on Flight 202 is that in just 1 hour of targeted bullying, this captain completely dismantled decades of industry-wide CRM training.
He erased it entirely.
He effectively time-traveled that cockpit back to the 1970s. It reminds me of the most toxic workplace dynamics imaginable.
Oh, for sure.
It's exactly like a junior developer watching the CEO of a company about to accidentally wipe the entire corporate database. They see the keystrokes happening, they know it's going to be a disaster.
But they don't say a word.
Right. Because that same CEO just spent an hour screaming at them and making them feel entirely incompetent in front of the whole staff. The junior developer is too paralyzed to reach out and grab the mouse. They just sit there and watch the system crash.
That analogy is spot on. The report explicitly details the psychological consequences of the captain's harassment. After those humiliating sessions early in the flight, the first officer generally withdrew.
He just shut down.
He remained quiet. The investigators concluded that he suffered from severe underconfidence and became totally submissive to the captain's authority.
That's so sad.
The captain essentially beat the assertiveness out of his co-pilot. So, an hour later, when the weather deteriorated, when the captain intentionally broke the minimum descent altitude, when he started improvising a rogue route into the mountains.
The first officer was too psychologically compromised to challenge those breaches.
Exactly.
It is just a devastating realization. The first officer was sitting right there. He had the same training, the same instruments in front of him. He was subjected to the same 21 EGPWS warnings, screaming, "Puyupi!"
He knew.
He knew exactly how much danger they were in. But the psychological barrier to speaking up, the fear of being reprimanded again by his bully, had literally become higher than the fear of dying.
It's unthinkable, but true.
The captain's ego silenced the one and only person who could have saved the aircraft.
And that is why this crash is studied so intensely by human factors experts. The aircraft did not fail. The millions of dollars of safety computers worked flawlessly.
They did everything they could.
The systems practically begged the crew to take evasive action. The failure was entirely 100% interpersonal. It was failure of leadership, a total collapse of flying discipline, and the creation of a deeply toxic microculture inside that flight deck.
Which fundamentally changes how you look at this entire disaster. Airblue Flight 202 wasn't brought down by a mechanical glitch, and it wasn't even brought down by the towering cumulonimbus clouds over Islamabad.
No, it wasn't.
It was destroyed by arrogance. It was destroyed by a psychological dynamic that turned a modern collaborative cockpit into a dictatorship, and it cost 152 people their lives.
It's a heavy, heavy toll.
It really is. And, you know, you don't have to be an airline pilot for this to resonate. Think about your own daily life. Think about how often you succumb to get-there-itis on a long road trip, pushing through exhaustion or a bad storm jerk because you want to be home.
We all do it.
Or worse, think about your professional life. How often do you see steep power dynamics silence necessary warnings in your own office? How often does the fear of a harsh boss stop someone from pointing out a fatal flaw in a project?
It happens all the time.
It is a universally human flaw. It happens in boardrooms and hospitals everywhere.
Yeah.
But at 2,300 feet, in a thunderstorm, flying toward a mountain, the consequences of that silence are immediate and final.
It raises a profoundly important question about the limits of technology in any industry. We spend billions of dollars engineering foolproof, redundant systems.
Right.
We build backup computers. We map the entire topography of the Earth. We program synthetic voices to shout warnings when danger is imminent. We can engineer the hardware to near perfection. But all of those technological safety nets implicitly assume that the humans operating the hardware are completely rational actors.
And as we've seen today, we aren't. We are messy, emotional creatures driven by ego, fear, stress, and social dynamics, which leaves you with a really unsettling thought to walk away with.
What's that?
If an aviation system is perfectly designed with modern redundancies, 2 highly trained professional pilots, 21 automated alarms, and strictly established minimum descent altitudes, but a single human ego can override all of it simply by bullying a subordinate, is any technological safety system truly foolproof?
That is the ultimate unresolved vulnerability. Until we engineer a way to consistently safeguard human communication and psychology under pressure, the perfect machine will always remain at the absolute mercy of the flawed human.
A sobering reminder that the loudest alarm in the world simply does not matter if the culture in the room prevents anyone from listening to it. Think about that the next time you're in a room where someone's ego is drowning out the warning signs.